Welcome to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well, broadcasting on KSQD Santa Cruz on 90.7 FM and live streaming at ksqd.org. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist. The interview for this show was recorded back in mid-March 2020, just as the gravity of the coronavirus pandemic was being understood here in the U.S., and the first shelter-in-place order was issued in California for what we thought would be 3 weeks. Little did we imagine at that time, here we would be 9 months later, needing more than ever to take to heart serious strategies to care for our frazzled mental health in order to get through the long haul of this pandemic. And at this time, we're again entering the highest risk and most restrictive level, now known as the purple tier, in most of California's counties. I think it's fair to say that we're all feeling stressed and weary from the shutdowns, school and business closures, social isolation, financial stress, election stress, missed milestones, missed holidays with family or friends, shifting levels of restrictions, the current rising infection rates, and the unimaginable death toll. Given the challenges that every one of us is facing, we decided to rebroadcast this show on mental health first aid for COVID and believe that the practical advice in this show about how you can take care of your mental health would be equally, if not more, helpful today than the day it first broadcast last spring. When we created this show, we were thinking about the special needs of some of our most vulnerable community members, those already living with mental health conditions and their families. However, as the pandemic has continued to surge, we are recognizing that all of us have to adopt deliberate and intentional strategies to care for our mental health under such trying conditions. The practical ideas shared in this show give you things you can do and resources that can help us all build resilience and maintain better mental health through these ongoing difficult times. So stay with us and learn more about how to take care of your own mental health and support the wellness of your loved ones. Let me tell you more about the guests who joined me for this discussion. Anastasia Babulovich works as the program manager for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, Santa Cruz County. She's extremely passionate about working in the mental health field because of her own experiences with mental illness. Anastasia's diagnosis of bipolar disorder, initially thought to be major depressive disorder, at age 16, inspired her interest in mental health care, its history, and the politics that surround it. She graduated from the University of California, Santa Cruz with a BA in psychology in 2016, and has since worked with local mental health organizations such as Second Story and MHCAN. Anastasia deeply values empowerment, hope and equity for all, and works for a world where mental health conditions are widely accepted, understood, and treated with dignity. Cara Bowman is a marriage and family therapist in Scotts Valley who specializes in grief and trauma. She is a certified clinical trauma professional who responds to mental health needs following crises in the community. She also volunteers for Hospice of Santa Cruz County. Cara was a guest on our show about a year ago on a show discussing suicide and grief. And now for the interview. Welcome. We're so happy to have you back, Cara, and welcome to you, Anastasia.
Thank you.
So we have our work cut out for us today, trying to talk about, what would help people during these difficult times. And I do like to usually start with a personal story in our shows. So Anastasia, are you willing to talk about, what you are finding particularly challenging in terms of your mental health right now and what you're doing to help and support yourself?
Sure, I'd be glad to start. I've been really thinking about two things that have been impacting my mental health with this whole weirdness that's been going on. And one of those is my main stress reliever slash maintainer of my mental health is my yoga practice. So exercise has been really important for me in managing depression and anxiety and getting a community to get connected to. So, and that's kind of my accountability is, it's kind of hard to exercise at home. So it's been really hard to not have that community in place. So I honestly, this week I have not exercised at all. And I've definitely noticed my symptoms of anxiety and depression increasing. So it's something that, I'm going to have to find a whole new thing, maybe find an online community, yoga community. Because it's very different to just kind of work out by yourself. There, you don't kind of quite have that much I don't know, accountability again and inspiration to do your best.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been very difficult for me. And then the other thing is with myself, and I know a lot of other peers that I've been talking to, a lot of our default states is to actually just stay at home and not talk to anybody, especially when we're not doing very well. We just want to kind of isolate. Now it's mandatory. So it's really easy to just be like, you know what? No, I'm not talking to anyone. I don't need to talk to anybody. So I've been really having to stay accountable to, I'm texting my mom every other day because I know she's worried. I have to set up, my call with my best friend. Just really, a lot of things are changing, and I'm noticing that my coping skills that I've worked so hard to build over these past couple of years are going to look very, very different in the next however long we're going to have to do this. So I'm still, if anyone out there is like, how do you do it? I'm also still in the process of adjusting. So I think we'll figure it out together as the systems around us change as well.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because I noticed, as I was collecting resources for the show, that I too am reading things and thinking, I really need to do that. That would really help me right now. So I do think that we're all in this together and figuring it out. I appreciate you saying that. And also what you were saying about how staying at home can be a trigger. And I'm wondering if you're feeling like old patterns, like the seeds of those old patterns getting stimulated by staying home, because structure and routine is a lot of times what will help support us in our lives.
100%, 100%. I mean, even with my work, which is a big, for me, it's something I love to do and something that adds a lot of structure to my day and my week. It's changing, and I'm just sitting at the computer all day at home, not interacting with people, which is something that, a skill I need to keep sharp. Otherwise, I'm just gonna not do it, because again, that's kind of what my brain's default state is. So it's been really, really difficult with the structure kind of the rug getting pulled out from underneath me.
Yeah, and so have you taken any steps yet to adapt? You said about talking to your mom. Like, do you actually talk to her just on the phone, or do you try to use video at all, or what are you doing to adapt to that?
Yeah, we do talk on the phone, and that's something we pretty regularly do because she lives far away from me anyway. One thing that has been super helpful and just a huge highlight in my week has been Zoom calls with the peer support group facilitators that I work with, because we're trying right now to move all of the NAMI programs to a remote option like Zoom. And we've been having these Zoom meetings that have been so much fun. Like, it's such a different experience than being on the phone with somebody, because you get to see their faces, and it's kind of this cool new futuristic thing that we're all doing together. And we all kind of thought that it wasn't really going to work, or we were all going to hate it. But I think it's been, of course, it's not a one-to-one replacement for seeing somebody, really being with someone in person, but it's been something that's been huge. And I've heard from a lot of them, and feeling for myself too, that it makes us feel a lot less isolated, and like, oh, you're in your homes too, and you're doing this. Like, we're together. It's not just me feeling weird over here.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Are you hearing any other things from other peers as you talk to them about what their particular needs or challenges are right now? When I refer to peers, I want our listeners to know what peers is a word meaning those who are living with mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been definitely hearing a lot of this thing that I've been experiencing of just being really sucked into that social isolation. And actually, I recently read an article that kind of talked about how social distancing doesn't actually have to mean social isolation, but that's what a lot of us are kind of reverting to. With my call with the peer support group facilitators, a lot of them were saying, "Oh, this is just what my life is. It's just now mandatory." So that's been a big theme. And then of course the collective stress, collective anxiety, it is, I've heard from a lot of people, it's been ramping up a lot of our symptoms. So that's definitely been a big, it's been a big, feeling the collective stress. has been a big impact, I think, on a lot of us.
Mhm. Now, I don't know if you're finding this at all, or maybe Cara, you'd like to comment on this, but as I've been meeting with my clients this week, it's been really interesting that some of the clients who have dealt with anxiety for a long time have a really big toolkit that they're reaching into right now, and they've already sort of used and practiced those tools. And for some of them, they're actually doing a little better than some of my clients who maybe are coming to counseling for other reasons, not necessarily underlying mental health reasons. Because they kind of know I have to do these things. Like, so they were quicker to adapt and start to go back to those coping skills that they already know really well. Um, so that's been an interesting observation. I'm wondering if that I've been having. I'm wondering if you're noticing that at all for yourself or for the peers that you're talking to.
Sure. I've seen a very wide variety of reactions, and I think you're right that some people have more tools and they've practiced tools, so they kind of know what to pull out of their toolkit. Isolation can cause increased anxiety and depression within days in people without pre-existing mental health conditions. So that's, I think, even more pronounced with people who have either a mental health condition, or they may have had a previous condition such as PTSD that they've worked through, which might resurface at this time. So anytime the world changes suddenly, it's a stressor, and that can cause old patterns. And so the old patterns may be a mental illness, or it may be just unhelpful coping mechanisms, or it may actually be a trauma reaction. So many different things can come up. And so that's the side of the equation that is how people are responding. And then there's the other side of the equation, which is what tools do they have to bring to the situation. You're right that many people have a bigger toolkit if they've worked on this for years. And some of those tools that work in normal times don't work in these times. And so some people need to expand their toolkit.
Everyone needs to expand their toolkit
Good
right
point. Good point. Everyone needs to expand their toolkit, but they also need to be self-connected enough in order to see, are the things that normally support me supporting me now? Do I need to make some adjustments? Do I need to add some things in? And so that has to do with trying things, observing the reaction, and correcting along the way. So I consider this kind of a big experiment, and I really hope people don't panic if they're having difficult reactions, but just use that as information to go forward and see how they can better support themselves.
So I really do hear that you're also trying to make sure people know that it's pretty normal to have the resurgence of symptoms right now, and not to panic about that too, right? That
Absolutely. It makes total sense, because when our brain is under stress, it returns to well-worn pathways that it's used in the past to deal with stress. And so it may go there first.
Great. Okay. Anastasia, did you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, I guess just one thing that's coming up and has been giving me a lot of comfort is anything anybody is experiencing right now is pretty normal, because we're in such an abnormal time. So I think anything from like overwhelm to stress to symptoms returning to joy and depression, I think all those right now are okay to feel.
You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD Santa Cruz, K-Squid, many voices, one station. And this is State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss. We recorded this interview on mental health first aid for COVID back in March 2020. But given the recent surges in the pandemic, we thought this show would again be helpful for listeners. In the interview, I talk with guests, NAMI Santa Cruz Program Manager Anastasia Babulovich, and licensed psychotherapist and trauma specialist Cara Bowman, about ways for all of us to take better care of our mental health as we navigate so many compounding stressors and challenges as the pandemic draws on. I want to remind listeners that all the resources we're talking about can be found on the resource list posted with the podcast for the show at ksqd.org/state-of-mind/. And now a word from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks Family Service Agency of the Central Coast for supporting this program. Family Service Agency provides counseling and support for people of all ages facing life crises and challenges. You can reach them at 423-9444 to see if they can help you. Thank you, Family Service Agency of the Central Coast, for supporting KSQD 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. So I want to take a minute to talk about structure, because that is one thing that I was noticing this week, having lots of conversations about with my clients. And so, Kara, would you like to say something about the importance of creating and maintaining structure as a way to support mental health right now?
Sure. Structure, there's a lot of research reaching back for decades showing that structure supports mental health, especially in people with mental health challenges, but in all of us, really. We want predictability, we want meaning, and it's more important now than ever. So what that means in terms of these new times is making a new structure. Your old one has fallen apart, and you need to be proactive about making a new one. So I would really think about that word. If you're not proactive, then you're going to be reactive. And so in order to support yourself in the best way possible, you want to be proactive about getting things in on a daily basis, such as physical activity, mental activity that's rewarding, connection with other people, and emotional relaxation. So those are some of the baselines that you want to get in on a daily basis. And then I think that structure is empowering, and it also can create good habits. There's one silver lining. It's kind of a booby prize from all this, which is there's a concept called post-traumatic growth, which means in a stressful situation, you can actually create habits more easily than in a normal non-stressful situation. So you've got this opportunity to repeat new habits on a daily basis, and you can actually come out of this situation in a better space than you went into it if you're proactive about how you structure your day. I would really want people to think about, when they're putting things in their day, not how they're going to feel while they're doing the activity, but how they're going to feel at the end of it when they're done. So maybe if you watched a movie, you'll feel good when you're done. Maybe if you watch 3 movies, you won't. Maybe if you reach for alcohol, it'll feel good while you're doing it, but not so much when you're done. So that's a good litmus test for whether an activity is feeding you, or is supporting you, or not supporting you, draining you.
Yeah. So can we talk about just really some of the on-the-ground practicalities of that? For instance, many of the health practitioners, myself included, have gone to using video platforms this week. So one of the things that has come up repeatedly in my week is my clients being in their pajamas at no matter what time of day that I was meeting with them. And so as we talked about structure, we really talked about how does it feel to not get dressed all day, or how would it feel different to get dressed? And so that, just as a very simple practical thing, some of my clients were agreeing to get, save the pajamas for the weekends and get dressed during the week. So do you have any other sort of pragmatic, maybe Anastasia, you might be going through some things like that. Do you have any sort of practical examples of what putting structure into place looks like for you?
First of all, I confess I am in pajamas as we speak, and I also confess that it doesn't feel great. I mean, like when I woke up, I was like, oh, I could just be in pajamas all day. It felt awesome, but yeah, as the day goes on, it's like, oh gosh, I haven't done anything all day. So thank you for that. That's actually a really helpful tidbit. I was really excited to talk to two therapists today. Yes, I win. Um, yes, I really am glad you brought up the topic of structure, because that's been something that's really been important in my mental health journey. It's been a really slow process to get to the point of having structure in my life and in my days. So I would say number one for me was really important to start slow. So start really, really small and not just thinking, okay, all of a sudden I have to go from doing nothing all day, sleeping all day, to now I have to eat super healthy. I have to work out every day, and I have to call my friends every day, and I have to meditate, and I have to read, and all these things. So what was really important for me was I think I started, again, going back to my yoga practice, which has been really important in adding a lot of things to my life, including structure. I just, had the little yoga schedule that I had with me. And I was like, okay, 4 p.m. I'll go once a week to that 4 p.m. class for this next month. I'll just try once a week. And kind of that increased. The more that I did it, the better it felt, and it kind of built on itself. So that to me is really important, to not just like pile everything on all at once, but just start with a really, really small thing that I could do. So I will say for myself, right now I'm trying to get a little bit of exercise in my days, and that has not been working out for me this week. So I'm kind of making this promise to myself of half an hour every single day, something small. So even just taking a walk, I'm going to count it. Even, walking around my house for half an hour, I'm going to count it. Doing yoga stretches outside for half an hour, I'm going to count it. So that's been really important. The other thing that's really helped me in structure has been rewarding myself. So after I do something, even something silly like a sticker, or like, a snack, or I don't know, watching a TV show for half an hour, really does something to the brain, I think. Again, like I've been using the sticker system and have been really shocked by how well it works, of just giving myself a little gold star in my journals, and that it really releases something in my brain. You guys probably know more about the chemistry there, but it's been very important to me to feel like, okay, I to kind of build on that reward system that happens after I do something that I know is good for me. And then the third thing I wanted to
saying to
mention,
yourself, really good job. Even just like that sort of thing of us pausing and acknowledging that you did a good job, and, following through on that thing you were intending to try to do.
And it's very
exactly.
nice to make a structure, make some goals, and check in with a friend. So that becomes connecting and accountability. Um, so you can check in daily. How many of your goals did you meet? You can check in weekly. And it's another way to support yourself. I don't want people to think of structure as a whole bunch of tasks you don't want to do that you should
Right.
do. I really appreciate what you said, Anastasia, because I like the way when you weren't doing things, you had curiosity about it rather than beating yourself up. And you said, well, how can I make this work for me? How can I readjust? And rather than doubling down on a strategy that wasn't working. So I think structure can also give us permission. If you give yourself permission to lay in bed for 2 hours every afternoon in your pajamas, then it's part of your structure, and it doesn't become something you're doing that's quote wrong unquote, but something that's relaxing. So structure doesn't have to be always difficult tasks. It can also be fun things or relaxing things, connecting things. And it can be a time that we have permission to do things that we normally don't give ourselves permission to do.
Right.
And that can be freeing too. So structure simply to me means doing things that support our mental health rather than drain our mental health. So you're your own yardstick of that for your own self, your own brain, your own body.
And we have something built in, I don't know what it is, that we all need structures in our life, all kinds of structures, whatever they are, whether they're our work or our play or our relaxation, ways to support that we do those things, whether it's like a book group that we go to, or a dinner party that we have with people, or but there is something I know I've observed in others and also in myself, is that while we need structure, there's something in us that loves to hate it, that pushes against it, and at times of stress, it particularly abandons it. I'm not so sure I can say that I understand what that thing is, but I just wanted to normalize that there's this funny relationship. I think people are constantly sort of striving to create structures that work for them and abandoning them and then coming back to them again.
We have a very strong need for autonomy, but let me play with it a little bit. What if part of your structure was, I'm going to stay in bed for 1 hour after I wake up? Then all of a sudden, that's not a shameful, depressing thing, but that's a supportive thing.
Right.
So we think of structure as this Calvinistic must work way. And I'd like to think of structure as supporting us rather than something that we're doing to ourselves.
Right. I love the word scaffolding, because that is more like something that actually builds you up than. So that's a word I like to use a lot.
But back in reality times, when everything was okay.
That's a good reference.
What was really important to me was actually to have flexibility within my structure. So what I did was, I know that I need yoga in my week at least 3 times. If, more is always better. But I'll say, after work for 3 times a week, I will go to yoga. The other days of the week, I can do whatever I want. I could go home, take a nap, do whatever. And I didn't kind of marry myself to any days of the week that I was going to yoga or going to go home and relax or do anything else that I wanted to do. And that was really important for me personally, because I really need a lot of flexibility. Otherwise, I feel very rigid and very stuck and not productive. So having some flexibility within that is really important. So I know that there's been a lot of yoga teachers that have been doing live streams. I know there's actually a resource that I thought of, Deborah, that I haven't given to you yet. It's called The Mighty. It's like a mental health forum, and they're doing classes. I will definitely send you the link so you can put it on.
And we will make sure that gets posted on the resource list that we're going to talk about later.
Great. And so it's, first of all, it's a mental health forum. It's online. It's just where you can share what's going on and hear other people's stories. And they're doing online classes. They're doing several a day, every single day. And then, so there's just a lot of ways to still keep that structure and community right now.
Yeah, some of the other things I've heard, just everything is going online, but meetups are going online. So if you've never tried those before, this would be a good time to start. Book clubs, 12-step groups. Those are a few of the things that are going online.
Great. Before we go to break, we have a poem by Kitty O'Meara. This poem is now also available as an illustrated children's book called And the People Stayed Home. You can find that book and more poems inspired by the pandemic on our resource list posted on the page for this show at ksqd.org/state-of-mind/. And people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced. Some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the people healed, and, in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed, and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses, and made new choices, and dreamed new images, and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully, as they had been healed. That was In the Time of a Pandemic, a poem by Kitty O'Meara. And now for a station break. You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD K-Squid, and this is State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and in this interview, I'm talking with guests NAMI Santa Cruz Program Manager Anastasia Babulovich, and licensed psychotherapist and trauma specialist Cara Bowman. and we're discussing mental health first aid for COVID, special considerations for those already living with mental health conditions, and ways for all of us to take better care of our own mental health and that of our loved ones as we navigate the extended impacts of this pandemic. Though we recorded this interview back in March 2020, we thought these ideas would be especially useful as the pandemic surges and we're in the darkest and coldest days of winter. Back to our interview. We were just wrapping up that conversation about structure, and I think, Anastasia, you brought up earlier the importance of managing anxiety and stress right now, both your own and the collective. Sort of anxiety and stress the soup that everyone is sort of living in right now. And I wanted to ask, are there specific things that you're thinking about or doing yourself to help with that?
Yes, absolutely. Something that has been very steady and the most accessible thing in my toolbox has been mindfulness practice. That plays into I actually just read a really great article about coping with depression and anxiety where somebody mentioned kind of their general principles being awareness, acceptance, and active change. They call it the 3 A's in terms of coping skills. So mindfulness embodies all three for me. So just being aware of what's going on in my head, what's going through my thoughts, paying attention to my body sensations has been really important. So like right now, I feel like my neck has been tensed up for the past week. So I know that, there's that I'm feeling stressed out, and I know I have my tools to be able to deal with that, which is where that active change kind of comes in. I know that if I want to feel better, I have to do something about that and not just sit with it and not do the same things that have been, causing what's been going on. So mindfulness has been really important. Even just 5 minutes a day, putting on a YouTube meditation video or just 5 minutes of gentle music and just sitting and taking deep breaths, really paying attention to my breath has been really important in my days, especially now where everything kind of feels very fast and also very slow at the same time. So checking in with myself as regularly as possible has been really important. And also, I'm really lucky to have some really wonderful loved ones around me. So, my family members, my partner, and my best friends, they've been all really important to just check in with and just vent a little bit. I know everybody's talking about this coronavirus thing that's happening, and it feels kind of exhausting sometimes, but it's also really important, I think, to let out whatever you're feeling, whatever's going on with somebody that you trust and love. And it's been really important for me to feel like I'm not alone in this weird thing that's going on.
So I love the way you describe mindfulness, because sometimes people react to that, but really what you were saying is mindfulness is just practicing slowing down and breathing and being right here, right now. As basic as that, right?
Exactly. It does not have to be a formal meditation. I think formal meditation, a guided meditation on YouTube can really help to get you into that space. But if that's something that doesn't work for you or you're averse to, just sitting down and really, saying, what am I feeling right now? What am I thinking? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? And getting down to the present moment can feel really grounding and peaceful in these chaotic times.
Cara, do you want to share about why, because you work a lot with people with, trauma and stress, and and I know you use a lot of mindfulness practices. Could you talk a little bit about why those are helpful and how people could access those?
Certainly. So under stress, our body is putting out stress hormones, noradrenaline, adrenaline, cortisol, and such, and that can cause us to have thoughts that causes more stress hormones, and it can be a looping cycle. So mindfulness practices can break that cycle and get us out of the threat system and into the soothing system in our bodies in a very physical way. So I don't like people to think of mindfulness as something they're doing. I like them to think of it as not a task that they can go through the steps, but they actually have to check in and see whether they're having a physiological relaxation, because there's no point in doing it if you're not having the physiological relaxation. And people can feel that in their bodies when they feel at peace. And so what research has shown is that times of stress are not a really good time to start a meditation practice, a silent meditation practice, or um, because unless you've already had one in place, because people's thoughts can tend to rush in when there's silence. And so Anastasia mentioned visualizations. And so visualizations are filling your mind with something relaxing. And there are a lot of them online, and I know those are on the resource list. And then relaxations, and those are bodily based practices, so such as progressive muscle relaxation or breathing exercises. And there are those that are on the list too. You can get them as phone apps. You can listen to them on the computer or watch videos on the computer.
And usually
So
somebody is guiding you through that, right?
exactly. Thank you. Yeah. So those have somebody guiding you through it. So you're listening to somebody else's voice rather than having your own thoughts fill the empty spaces. So if you don't have a meditation practice in place, then I would suggest that you start with either a visualization or relaxation practice. And so what you're going for is that physical sense of peace and calm, and that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. It changes brain wiring, and it changes the endocrine system, which releases hormones and spurs emotions and can change mood. So there are very physical responses to these practices, and I would experiment until you can find something that supports you. And Anastasia is exactly right. It doesn't have to be long. 5 minutes is enough. It's about breaking the cycle and giving your brain and body a new experience.
Yes, Kara, thanks. It is. It's like a reset button. And in fact, I had that experience this week. Like so many people, I was trying to learn new technology and trying to figure out how to work remotely in ways that I never had before, and was, facing all kinds of challenges with things not working, or as I had hoped, or just systems being overloaded. And I noticed that by the time I got to Tuesday, midday, I could just feel that the stress had been building, and I was feeling really skittish and jumpy, and I was having trouble concentrating. And I noticed that first, and then I decided I just had to take a break. And I went and did some yoga, which is something I do anyway, but I also put on some of my favorite gospel music and listened to that while I was doing my yoga. And it just, I wasn't even doing it for that long, 15, 20 minutes. And when I finished that, I just noticed I felt so different. I felt regrounded and calm and focused and able to get back to some productive work.
There's one more thing that I wanted to mention. So to kind of bring it back to today, because I think we've been talking about general mental health tools that are helpful in any time, especially in a stressful time. But for me right now, reducing anxiety means putting away my phone, not looking at the news. I allow myself one article a day on coronavirus that I know is from a trusted source, and then I try not to look at anything else as much as possible. It's kind of hard with, social media and our phones being in front of our faces all the time. But it's been really important for me to not get sucked into that hole of what's going on, especially since we don't know a lot that's going on right now. We're only going to find out what was going on today, 2 weeks from now or a month from now. So really not getting caught up in the information and misinformation that's out there, because that's hard to distinguish right now, has been really important for staying sane for me.
I'd like to say a little bit something about media that Anastasia was talking
Yeah, about managing media consumption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's been a lot said about managing consumption and limiting consumption, and that's all very much borne out by the research. Negative news can significantly change a person's mood. But there's another thing you can do besides limiting negative news, and that is countering it. There are positive news sites. There is a positive news podcast that's on the resource list that has some episodes about this virus.
What's that called, Kara? Can you just say so people can find it?
It's the Good News Podcast.
Oh, great.
It's called Good News Podcast about COVID-19 and other news. And there are also positive news sites online. So our brain has a negativity bias, and we look for the negative and we worry in order to protect ourselves. And we have to actively counter that so as not to fall into it. And one way you can do it is by seeking out good news and remembering that there are people doing positive things in the world, and that can help change your mood.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because we do need we need that balance.
I watch a lot of cat videos. Does that count?
Absolutely. Also puppies, they count too. What about just basic self-care during this time? What's the role of that, and why would it be particularly important now, do you think, Kara?
Well, self-care, especially for somebody with a pre-existing mental health issue, is extremely important because old patterns can be heightened. So self-care can help counter some of the old patterns. So supporting yourself through healthy eating, sleeping, exercise, mental health care, fun, meaningful activities every day, connecting activities every day. All of those things can help lessen symptoms of mental illness. I would like to say, if somebody is going into this with a pre-existing mental illness, I'd love for you to take a few minutes to think about your own warning signs. How will you know if you need to reach out for help? Maybe even put some what I call tripwires in place. If I'm thinking of self-harm, I will do X, I will call X. If it's been 3 days and I haven't contacted anyone or haven't gotten out of bed, I will do X. Whatever your particular problem signals are, know them and have, if possible, a very concrete way of knowing when you're decompensating and need to ask for help.
Yeah, and the other thing, Kara, that sometimes is really important is to write down the list of things that you can do that to get help before you're in that state, because it's really hard for people to think about where to get the help when they're in a bad state like that. So it's interesting to have it just bullet pointed out in order of priority. Like, I'm going to call this person first. I'm going to reach out to my therapist. I'm going to let a family member know, those kind of things.
Absolutely. And I encourage people to write down their plan, and there may be a different course of action for each worrisome symptom. So if you're thinking of hurting yourself, you may have one action wedded to it. If you haven't reached out and you're finding yourself depressed, there may be a different action wedded to it. So I would say if you can put concrete symptoms in place and a concrete action for each one, then you'll be in a good place for supporting yourself if there is a difficult period you need to get through.
You're tuned to listener-supported 90.7 FM KSQD, K-Squid, Community Radio for the Monterey Bay. And this is State of Mind, being human and living well. We're also live streaming over the web at ksqd.org. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss. The interview you're hearing on mental health first aid for COVID was recorded back in March 2020. But given the recent surges in the pandemic, we hoped this show would again be helpful for listeners. In the interview, I talked with guests NAMI Santa Cruz Program Manager Anastasia Babulevich and licensed psychotherapist and trauma specialist Kara Bowman about ways for us all to take better care of our own mental health as we navigate the cascading stressors and the long haul of challenges the pandemic presents. I want to remind listeners that all the resources we're talking about can be found posted on the resource list with this show at ksqd.org/state-of-mind/. Stay with us to learn more, and we'll be right back after this brief message from our underwriter.
KSQD thanks the Santa Cruz County chapter of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, for supporting State of Mind. NAMI offers a helpline and online peer, family, and ally education and support groups. Visit NAMISCC.org. That's again, NAMISCC.org. Thank you, NAMI, Santa Cruz County, for supporting community radio. K-Squid, 90.7 FM.
Back to our interview. So, Anastasia, I want to turn to you because you are you have quite a bit of experience with advocacy. So, because it might take time for this to percolate down, what would you say to people around their efforts maybe to get a good supply of medications on hand? What can they do you think?
Yes. So along with being a good healthcare advocate, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners are already, because that's when you're a mental health consumer, you have to do a lot of your own research of, is this medication going to work for me, and fight for, having it and having the right medication and making sure you know what works for you and what doesn't. So that's, I think, a really important part of the fight to keep. There's also, I've seen through NAMI California's website, I believe, and I know you're going to put it in your resource list, but there's quite a few bills going around right now in terms of COVID-19 relief, specifically for mental health consumers. So it's right now is a really good time to start advocating for those things. There's like a pre-written letter that's really great that you can just send out to your senator. And actually at any point with both with COVID-19 and with any other mental health advocacy, NAMICA.org is a really good website for that. It's our state. And if anyone from other states is listening, you have a NAMI in your state as well. But it's a really good site for advocacy and just to see what is it that we should be fighting for right now and how do we do it. It'll tell you step by step, like for this, you should talk to your representative. For this, you can send a letter. Here's the phone number of your local policymaker. So right now could be a really good time to start advocating for mental health support during this time.
Yeah, and do you have any? That's really great. I'm glad you said that because they are trying right now to make sure that those people that are most vulnerable will be able to get, tested for the virus at no cost, and be able to get into housing, to be safer, and a whole variety of things that are written into that bill. So I do encourage people, it will be on the resource list, to take a look at it. Mm-hmm. But I also was wondering if you had any sort of personal advocacy around people trying to talk to their doctors or the pharmacists about getting a supply of medication. What would you recommend, having lived that experience yourself?
Yeah, I just want to, first and foremost, it's a fight. I definitely see a lot of efforts outcoming from the top of making this fight a little bit easier, but just knowing that, it's something that you're going to have to speak up for and really talk to your doctor. And if you're not satisfied with the services that your doctor is providing you, there's grievance procedures for every single health organization that exists. So figuring out what is that grievance procedure and taking the steps if you're not receiving competent care, or if you're not getting, what our laws say, if you can have longer prescriptions now, then you can have those longer prescriptions. So just knowing your rights, being educated about what is available to you right now, and speaking up for it, because you're going to have to do that for yourself. So it's really important to speak up and fight for your competent health care.
And if you can't do it, sometimes a loved one, they may well be able to talk to your doctor and or the pharmacist about what your needs are and help negotiate that for you.
I'd like to say one more thing about advocacy in a way that you may not have thought of it. Everything you said is wonderful, and it can be meaningful and empowering to advocate both for yourself in terms of medication and in terms of laws. Another way to be helpful is to be a support for another person, and you don't need to solve any of their problems. All you need to do is listen and care.
Really well said. So we're kind of coming to an end of our time. I do want to let our listeners know, if you've liked what you've heard from Cara today, she wrote a beautiful piece called How to Not Let the Coronavirus Steal Your Mental Health While You're at Home. And that also will be posted on our resource list. And I just want to come back to a couple things that you said, Cara, when you talked about be open to something good that could come out of, this situation. There are some articles on the resource list under the heading of greater good, which one of them specifically, for instance, is about how school closures might be able to strengthen your family and how you can use that opportunity to do that. I also had a client this week talk about how her experience of life in the world is generally moving too fast. And as things have slowed down, she's feeling increasingly grounded and realizing that she has to take a stronger stance for slowing their family life down to a pace that actually works for her, because she's been instead trying to keep up with a pace that hasn't been working for her. So there are some interesting, unexpected aspects of this that we all, if we keep a beginner's mind and an open mind, we can learn something new from all of this. I just want to ask if there's any important points that maybe we haven't had a chance to touch on yet that either of you want to make sure that our listeners have heard.
I'd like to say that whatever you're going through, it's normal for you and it's understandable for you, and there is help.
Amen.
For today's In Your Voice segment, we have a poem by Richard Hendrick, a Capuchin Franciscan brother living in Ireland. The poem is called Lockdown.
Lockdown. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is isolation. Yes, there is panic buying. Yes, there is sickness. Yes, there is even death. But they say that in Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds again. They say that after just a few weeks of quiet, the sky is no longer thick with fumes, but blue and grey and clear. They say that in the streets of Assisi, people are singing to each other across the empty squares, keeping their windows open so that those who are alone may hear the sounds of family around them. They say that a hotel in the west of Ireland is offering free meals and delivery to the housebound. Today, a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number through the neighbourhood so that the elders may have someone to call on. Today, churches, synagogues, mosques and temples are preparing to welcome and shelter the homeless, the sick, the weary. All over the world, people are slowing down and reflecting. All over the world, people are looking at their neighbours in a new way. All over the world, people are waking up to a new reality, to how big we really are, to how little control we really have, to what really matters, to love. So we pray and we remember that, yes, there is fear, but there does not have to be hate. Yes, there is isolation, but there does not have to be loneliness. Yes, there is panic buying, but there does not have to be meanness. Yes, there is sickness, but there does not have to be disease of the soul. Yes, there is even death, but there can always be a rebirth of love. Wake to the choices you make as to how to live now. Today, breathe. Listen. Behind the factory noises of your panic, the birds are singing again. The sky is clearing. Spring is coming, and we are always encompassed by love. Open the windows of your soul, and though you may not be able to touch across the empty square, sing.
That was Lockdown, a poem by Richard Hendrick. This and other poems can be found on our resource page. I want to let folks know that there are many more resources included there than what we were able to talk about in the interview, including information about NAMI's online support groups for peers, which is those people living with mental illness, and for their family members, parents, and caregivers. There's also an extensive list of faith communities, Buddhist, Jewish, Christian, and others, that are now offering online services, meetings, and classes, as well as guides for parents about ways to support your children, and special resources put together for transgender youth, and so much more. So go to our website, ksqd.org, to the State of Mind program page and check that out. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I want to say thank you again to my guests today, Anastasia Babulovich and Cara Bowman. And thanks to you for joining us here on State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. We thought it could be helpful to remind our listeners that something this big and that lasts this long is a historical event, and keeping that perspective may help give meaning and purpose to survive it. We hope you have found something in the show to help you get through this historically extraordinary challenge. To hear more conversations about mental health and wellness, join us on the first Sunday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. right here at KSQD 90.7 FM. Special thanks to Jeannie Baldzikowski for audio production and to Jennifer Young, who assists with research and outreach. And thanks to acoustic guitarist Adrian Legg for composing, performing, and donating the use of our theme music. You can find all the podcast episodes of this show on our ksqd.org website by typing State of Mind in the search bar, or subscribe and get them delivered directly to your listening device on either Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. Or listen through your home smart speaker by saying, play State of Mind podcast with Deborah Sloss on TuneIn. This is listener-supported radio, and that means that we want and we need to hear from you. If you like this or any previous State of Mind episodes, please help the shows get found and heard by more listeners by leaving us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It really does help. This is KSQD Santa Cruz. Just remember, 90.7 FM, KSQD, your ink spot on the dial. Stay with us.